I want to introduce negative space. So here's a question. What do you see? There's something recognizable. And if you've seen this before, I'm sure you've seen it and you're aware of it. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So if you look at the white shape, it's a vase. It's a nice kind of Baroque style candelabra type vase. But if you look at the red shapes, do you see faces, profiles? And I'm looking at everybody, see if I see heads shaking. Yes, good. Now I can easily switch that, and this is not a trick. It's just I'm going to switch it over. Whoa. What I want to show you here is this. Whether you think, and you now see them both. Can everybody see both of them, the vase and the faces? And how amazing is it that you could see both at the same time? Now, that's the right brain, left brain. Our left brain is trying to make sense of what is this thing that I'm looking at? Looking for the pattern, recognizing it, naming it, and then archiving it. Just, okay, got it. Solved it. Next. Our right brain is looking at space. So here's the trick. When you look at the white as the space, you see the profiles. But you could also see the red as the space. That's when you see the vase. And that's what I wanted to deal with. Another way of simplifying our method of drawing by using positive, negative space. So here's our first exercise. And one really good exercise is to actually draw these. And you know what? We'll take a minute to go ahead and do it. So if you have your sketch paper, go ahead and just place your pencil down. And you're going to look at it. And you're just going to deal with, at some point, you're going to want to read, okay, am I actually looking at the shape of the thing that I'm looking at? Or am I just solving forehead? And I don't want to use language. That usually activates your left brain. But am I just using language to solve what I see as forehead, nose, lips, chin, neck? Or am I actually looking at the shape of the line and the angles of them? And I'm going to go over here to this side, and it's a little tricky. So here's what happens. We look at our reference. In this case, I'm going by the profiles, but I can also look at the shape of the vase. So it's, interesting. I could look at the face as my subject, or I could look at the vase as my subject. And somehow I could see both, and I could begin to see smaller, simpler shapes, curves, and resolve them a little bit easier. So there we have it. And if I were to just color this in the way we have it there, then it would actually make a little more sense. So when I do this very, very simple drawing, I can actually see where I was paying attention to the curvature of the lines, to the actual shapes, lengths, angles, and smaller little shapes. That is what makes our drawing a success or not. So we're going to try to do this exercise, and I have one ready for you, which is this one here. So this is just a red shape, white shape. I'm going to go ahead and flip this paper over. This is why I want you to do it with sketch paper. And I want you to take your entire page, and I want you to draw either, it's up to you. You can draw the red shape or the white shape, because you can identify both and just simplify. So it puts me right here at the top. And I'm going to start somehow. Some may choose to start down here. Some may choose to start right here in the middle. And all you see is, what I want you to see is, ideally you would want to identify the white shape so you could see it a little bit better. But the key is identifying simultaneous white and red shapes and confirming whether you have just a little bit of likeness, a little bit of closeness. So it's much easier to draw this way, and I'll show you why. It'll make sense in just a second. So I'll give you a couple more seconds. It's very simple. It's just one line. But if you look at it as that white shape, I did pretty good. And I'll show you where we go next. Now this one is going to get a little bit tricky, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. So remember, you still see red or white shapes. I see what happened here. So if I were to continue drawing the white shape, now I'm going to deal with things I can name. So, I see that there's that thing here that goes right into this thing, and there's the little feature there, blah, blah, blah. So what I want to do is somehow shut my brain down from using language and identifying. And just in this case, I'm going to draw the red shape. So the red shape has no name. It's just a curve that goes like this. It's another little line that goes this way with the little angle that goes right there. And these smaller little shapes here, sometimes when we look at a cloud, oh, look, that looks like a bunny or an alligator. We need to, it's still a cloud, but we identify the shapes and we name them. So here I want you to really pay close attention to the negative space. In this case, the shape and the fine curves and lines of the red shape that has no name, some of the little angles, the direction of the line, the length of it, some of the curves. And the key is not to let your brain make up information. Because usually what happens here with these shapes is we go right back to here, where the shape becomes, a nose and a mouth and thing. And we lose the likeness because we know, it's a hat with the thing. And we just make up information. What we want to do is look closer, as close as we can, to the actual angles, lengths, curvatures of those shapes, simple shapes. And then we get to this. This is what we were looking at. So this man, it's a silhouette of a man with a hat and a cane. And this is much simpler. Remember, we have basic information here. So just simplifying the positive negative space is going to be much easier to draw. And this is to draw anything. I'm going to go ahead and fold this paper one more time and go to our one more that I have prepared for you, just so we can get this all the way through. And so I'm showing you from beginning to end. So I show you the entire subject. It's also easier because it's silhouette. So if I were to ask you to draw this, and you're going to go ahead and draw this man walking. When you come to an area where, for example, I choose to start right here at the neck, and I'm going to go, again, not naming, looking at the perimeter, following very closely. I reach this area here, and I don't want to use the name of what that is, but I'm going to say it, face. You can literally look at, I filled it in with red so you could see it as a shape. So identifying that negative space, it's almost like going for a walk. This is what I want you to feel. You're going for a walk, and you're going for a walk with your eyes. So your eyes need to stay on your subject as long as possible. Every time you take your eyes off of your subject, you lose your place and you lose the connection to that actual shape. And it's easier to want to make up information. And sometimes you find out that it's little triangular shapes. Or, as I've said before, that bunny that we identify. A straight line that just has a little bit of curve. And anytime we come into an area that has little or more complex shapes, we want to read the negative space, the outside of our subject. And I don't have to go all the way and continue that. I could go right back to this spot, keeping my eyes on my subject. So as I draw, my eyes are on my subject. Out of every 10 seconds that I'm drawing, my eyes are looking at the reference 9 seconds at least. So the longer you look at your subject and you allow your hand to begin to feel like your eyes, as your hand just traces what your eyes are seeing. That's what we want. Now I come to this little area here. There's a little red negative space shape inside of a few other shapes. And that happens here as well. And that's really fun to do. When we have these, it becomes a lot easier. And I'm talking about this one. So once I can place this, all I need to do is draw this red shape. And if you could see it, it's almost like a mountain peak. Without me having to worry about thinking that it's a leg that becomes pants and shoe over here. All I need to worry about is, am I capturing, and I'm filling it in for you, this shape, the negative space shape that I see. The closer I draw these shapes to what's actually there, the better your drawing is going to be. So once you begin to get the angles, the lengths, and notice how easy that was. That once we get here, you can actually just finish up your drawing, and you can do this very, very loosely. So here we are. Now we're going to go to our project. And using this method of negative space drawing, what I want you to do today is go to my sketchbook and I'm going to switch over from color pencil to a pencil or maybe an ink pen. And here we are. So I emailed you two different, it's the same image. One is more vertical. The other one has a bigger crowd. So we're going to start with this simpler one. And what I want you to do is this. And I should do a quick demo. See if it works really fast. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick demo where what I want you to do today is this. I want you to pick a spot in this crowd and place your pencil down, and you're going to, in a way, identify, and I'm doing this really quick as a demo. I'm actually not even looking at my paper. This is 100%, it's called blind drawing because I don't look at my paper. I'm just staring at the shapes and the negative shapes that I can solve within this drawing. Now, sometimes the lines cross, connect, or juxtapose other areas, and it is not a perfect rendering of a crowd, but notice that I'm going a little bit faster than I should be. This should be done a lot slower with a little time for me to look down once and check, and I just did, and I'm actually on my way to seeing that it is somewhere near what I was expecting. Again, looking for those negative space shapes within the figures. And you see how easy it starts becoming. And I was trying to do this in 1 minute. I may have been over the 1 minute. I'm going to go a little bit faster. Now, you do not want to do this fast. The slower you go, the better your lines are going to be. But what I want you to do is work your way around the negative space of these crowds. And what you're going to find is you're going to want to develop how you're going to get inside the negative space into the subject area that is going to begin to develop some of the detail of the clothing, as I'm doing here. And also how you're going to move away from the negative space of this crowd and move into the negative space that we see behind it. And notice here, for example, there's a very easy negative space shape that pretty much solves almost the entire puzzle for us. I can also look at the negative space from the outside, not as a shape, but just as a simplified line. And there you go. So it is bringing all of these little elements just by looking at negative space. And I'm hoping you test out different materials as well. So I am going to do the first one with pencil, and then maybe I'm going to add a little color pencil or a little bit of watercolor. And then maybe I could do a secondary type of a detail drawing with a little bit of ink, maybe. So what I am doing is I'm giving you the choice. You could do this one with a little bit less people, or if you feel really you want a challenge, then you go for this one where we have almost double the crowd. And I almost want to do this one. So, you know what? Let's do that one. And I hope you do have both of these images. So I'm just going to leave this part of the crowd so you can see it a little closer. Now this would force me to work horizontally because the crowd is going to extend all the way across. So my sketchbook is going to be placed horizontal. I'm going to begin. And this is a very kind of meditative type of drawing. You really have to laser focus your eyes, your observation. How well can you see and kind of size, get a sense of how the size. You don't want to make the people this big because then this is not going to fit, and then obviously they're not going to fit across. So I want to get a sense of scale, so they're going to be about this big. I usually place my fingers on my paper to kind of give me a sense of how far along the paper I'm moving. And I'm going to begin my lines starting way to the left, right at the legs of this, looks like a young lady there. And here we go. So it's really just kind of like going for a walk, and you're just following the trail. Anything that comes along the way, you're going to want to make sense of it. So sometimes there's overlap, a person that is in front of your subject or right behind it. You're going to want to follow the line. The one thing you do not want to do is lose your place or add too much detail. Now, once again, I'm doing this at about 90% blind, meaning I'm looking at my reference 9 out of 10 seconds and down to my paper about once every 10 seconds. I can make up some information here, just closing up the feet. And there's my first figure. So that's about how much detail I want you to add to your drawings. Now you can play with a little bit of fuzziness on the line. Oh, very, very important thing that I forgot to say. If you could do this with continuous lines. So once you place your pencil down, you don't want to lift it up. So look at this beautiful negative space shape that is between the legs of these two subjects. You want to look at that shape, and it's giving you all the answers. And as you move along, you're going to discover that you're going to have a lot of fun with this, because it allows you to develop a little bit of your own style of drawing. So your line becomes fun. It actually starts becoming fun. But you're seeing your subject. Some of you may say, well, it's a little too cartoony. I want to draw more realistic. You can actually apply this technique, the more you practice it, as including it into a very realistic, and you actually have to when you do realistic drawing. So notice how this line went from this guy's leg right into this guy's jacket, because that's what the negative space dictated. And there's a little couple of elements here and there. But again, so I don't lose my place, I'm not going in or out. I'm just following along. And continue reading without adding any detail. Now, sometimes there's stuff, like there's another person right behind there. You want to make those lines a little bit lighter and blurrier, as if they're in the distance and they're out of focus. So see how quickly it starts becoming the crowd? And it's actually a really great chance for you to get more creative, as long as you don't get too carried away and away from the method, which is, as you can see, based on closer observation of just a different type of element. In this case, the negative space. So continue looking at the negative space here. Sometimes we get distracted by elements, like this lady's jacket and what's going on. Take a deep breath and just reset your focus back to negative shapes, negative space. Now you see kind of horizon and things in the background, lines that would come across this figure that obviously it's a little closer to us, so it's bigger. But you begin to notice that almost everyone's head is on that same line. Either when they're a little bit further away or a little closer to us, it just gets bigger or smaller, but it stays pretty much on the same line. And it happens to be our eye line, our horizon line. So I went away from this figure and I follow the top. I could go back and reconnect right at that spot and continue into the next figure. That way I don't lose my proportion and the size of them. So I know these feet align pretty close right there. And I got to tell you, the slower you go, the better your drawing is going to be. The slower you go, the more time you allow your eyes to make out and simplify and resolve the elements that you need to look for. The faster you go, the straighter your lines get, the more detail you lose. And if I were to show you this right now, I'm sure you guys could, hey, that looks like that corner of that picture from the Eiffel Tower photo that we did in class. You can almost identify the people if I were to point to this one right here. Oh yeah, that's the one with the red hat. So it is this quality of line. And notice that there is no detail at all. But the best I can do with solving all the negative space, the space between them, and the shapes of those spaces, it's actually resolving my positive drawing. And I will get back to it and develop some of that detail, which at the end you'll see, oh wow, it does not need much, because it is actually really cool and it'll look really cool. Saying pretty much everything it needs to say by the time you finish your line, just with the quality of your line. And this would be the ideal place to do this, because when you're in Paris, there's a thing called people watching. And you go to a cafe and you sit there, you pull out your sketchbook, and without even looking at your sketchbook, you blind contour draw. That is what this is called, blind contour drawing. And the more blind you do, is meaning the less you look at your paper, the better quality of lines you're going to get. And it ends up being a little bit about trust as well. How much do you trust what you see? And how much do you trust your hand to transcribe that shape that you're seeing? So maintaining your pace, breathing through it, not rushing, not losing your place, and really, really solving the shape. Those are the keys. Lots of little beautiful negative shapes in here. There's juxtaposition. So I kind of want to show you here just by looking at those. I'm going to zoom in for a sec. Actually, let me bring in this camera. And what I want to show you over here is this area. Right there. Gonna switch camera for a second. There we are. So hopefully you can see a little bit what I'm doing here. There we are. And notice how there's a couple of, I'm right here between all these legs. There's a couple of interesting shapes. And you could still read them as negative space. And when you place them together, it is amazing how it solves everything automatically. And so you see a whole crowd of legs. All you need to resolve is that little space between them. And even here where you have a guy behind this guy and they almost become one subject, all you need to do is break that line and continue finding those edges. Finding my way back. This is why you don't want to lose your position. You have to really get familiar with your subject, because if you move along and there's lots of negative space that you have to deal with simultaneously, it is easy to get carried away on the upper side or lower side and then lose your place. And then it could get frustrating, hectic. I'm going into this figure to break them apart. So I see somewhat of a kind of an elbow and the other edge of sort of a jacket and another elbow figure here. And just like that, you begin to see these crowds forming. Now we have a nice, interesting thing happening here where there's a little bit of space. There's a couple of figures way back there, very tiny. So they just become pencil blobs, kind of. Little tiny bit of negative space. And beyond that, I want to find easy way to connect once again that space by finding the next connection, the next negative space with this guy over here standing kind of in the middle of the whole thing, pretty much at the standard distance. And it almost looks like it has that raised arm. I could actually go ahead and finish that line, giving him a little bit of detail where that jacket ends, a little bit of that upper line that gives you the hoodie. And without closing anything else, there's something here on the floor. I can't even make out what it is. I'm assuming it's... Could that be a pet, maybe? But that's all I'm doing there. Reading the negative space around it. There's another figure a little bit closer. I'm not even dealing with lights or shadows here. It's all about line. It's all about negative space. Another interesting area of open space here. It takes me to this guy. With the blue jacket. And it pretty much... It begins to get really easy to see these shapes. And forget for a second what it is you're looking at, which really simplifies your drawing method and allows you to capture with much more simplicity, better quality. And in a way, I honestly, right here, I cannot tell you what that was. All it is shapes. That somehow read as 3 or 4 people standing together with, looks like a little kid. And that's it, just one massive lines that become that shape. Now I noticed that my line might be going upwards. I want to make sure I keep it even, because we are going to kind of put a horizon line eventually right through here, completing the space somewhere all the way back there, with a few details right in the middle of that, kind of completing the scene. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So we continue in the distance. Once again, another figure, another shape. And here we are with the, I guess I'm going to do these final 2 figures. Very, very simplified shapes. Now I add a little twist to my pencil. As I draw my line, I kind of rotate and twist my pencil just to give my lines a little bit of extra expression, a little bit of kind of a sensibility, quality, as if it were almost the textures, meaning if it's, you know, a jacket, it's a little softer than if it's, and in this case it's all mostly cloth, so the quality of the line is somewhat uneven. It's has very, you know, interesting characteristics even within one figure. I honestly don't want to touch it. That to me says everything I need to in terms of quality. I'm just going to divide these 3 figures here just a little bit with 1 or 2 lines. And I just want to give you a closer look, just really quick, as we move to the next stage. So here we are. So this is what it looks like. And it almost feels like you were tracing it. So as you move along, looking for all the negative space, the quality of the line, you see what I mean? It's kind of broken. It's supposed to be continuous. That was the sea of legs there, where all you see is that all these little shapes in between with negative space, creating that grouping. You almost see what they're doing. Like you get a sense of how they're giggling and talking to each other, and just by very simplified line expression, looking for contour and the negative space. There it is. And it is very satisfying, I gotta say. So some of these shapes you're like, wait, but that's not good drawing. Well, remember, we did this and we just drew a crowd of, I guess I'm gonna call it what, 30 people? 20 people, something like that, in just about 10 minutes maybe or less. So it is not meant to be, in this exercise, super detailed. You could take this method and apply it for much more detailed work. And it looks beautiful. When you look at actual masters, the way they drew, it was mostly based on this, combining the subject with the space around the subject. And that's what we just did here. So I'm going to go ahead and find my place for my next element. And that element, I mentioned there's a little bit of background, and I'm going to just do a little squiggly line. Again, negative blind contour drawing. I'm kind of keeping it really, really simplified. But I'm looking as I'm drawing, and I don't want to draw over my figures. So I'm just making it a little more interesting. So there's kind of tree lines, but it's a lot lighter. This line is a lot lighter than the lines I used on my figures. And it's a little jagged. So I'm doing kind of squiggly up and down to create somewhat of a tree line feel. Although it's not all tree lines in the background. I'm just doing that, a little more signature-like type lines. Scumbling is the word, where they go kind of back and forward, up and down, with no specific pattern. And there's one more kind of tree line that you see clearly right over here. So I'm going to do a little more kind of parallel hatch pattern, or more like a directional. You could hear it as I tap it on the paper to create that sort of tree branch organic look. And very cautious not to overdo it with lines, because it's very simplistic and it's going to look beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to go into the next structure, our Eiffel Tower. So it's very simple. You could go very, very detailed here, or you could just gesture it in. The more you try to look at that negative space when there is no shape outside the negative space, I'm trying to simply connect here where these heads match that arch here. And it's not going to be perfect, but there's that arch. That kind of gives us just a sense of the scale. That's also going to point me to the outer shape, the outer angle, the outer line. And right here, it's right about here, the thickness of it as well. Now, once I have this, the one I really want to identify is this location here, which is right about in the middle of this horizontal, in the center of this arch. And seeing the angle and the curvature of the shape pretty much gives you the entire Eiffel Tower. Now, how big that is going to be just as well, we deal with very simplified lines in this case with horizontals, and then just the curvature and the angles of the side. So how do I identify these negative spaces? You can just by looking at the contour and remember, face or vase. So right now, instead of looking at the Eiffel Tower like the vase, you want to look at the face and draw those little shapes. See how they come out, up, back in, and capture that angle. And I'm doing it very delicate, very slow, sort of kind of sketching it in. Now I'm going to the other side, and obviously there's symmetry. And once again, the angle. And I want to make sure I capture that length as well. Now remember, you could begin to add a little style to this. It does not have to be completely architectural, perfect straight lines. You could do something a little more gestural. And depending on how much detail you want to add, well, then you select, you choose what kind of line, how dark your lines are going to be. So I stayed with pencil for the entire thing. It would actually look really nice, a nice combination if it were pencil or ink, but I'm just going to stay with pencil. And now as I get into my subject, inside the shapes, how do I recognize negative shape within my subject? Well, what you do see are lines, and I see some very clear lines that are markers. And you kind of want to be careful because it's very easy to overdo it, and less is more. Less lines can actually solve it. I could actually stop right there and it would make sense. We know where we are. 9 out of 10 people would recognize this place, and maybe some of the people in the crowd. So I'm not looking for too much detail, although I do want to add just a few more lines, and those are these right here. Just a little break. And just because I do know and I'm familiar with the Eiffel Tower, I do want to add some of the smaller lines. And that would be right in here, using these X patterns. So dividing those into segments and then just crossing it with an X. And I do that all the way up pretty much. And on both sides. Going from corner to corner, maintaining that angle. One more feature you have here is these little they're kind of semi-ellipse, semicircles. A couple more vertical lines. As I continue adding those crossbars all the way up. And they just get smaller and smaller. And a good exercise would be to test out this with different materials. So if you did pencil, try it in ink. If you did ink, try it in pencil. If you tried color pencil, again, different mediums. If you did not do 100% blind drawing, try it. It is amazing what you will discover. It needs a few more lines right underneath here. And I have a feeling the further I try to develop this, what I would do next is just add a touch of color, but you have to be very cautious. Safest way, because I worked with pencil, I'm going to go to, I work with pencil, I'm going to go to color pencil. And that would kind of keep it a little safer. And I'm going to use the same approach. Very simple, almost blind contour drawing, capturing the colors that stand out the most. And I could actually do variations of color here. So I'm going to do different types of strokes. So some color patterns that are scumbling and some that are just parallel hatch. I'm not trying to color it like a coloring book because then all the line work that I did would be kind of wasted. So that's what you're going to discover here. How much color ruins the work that I did with my pencil lines. And it's not much. You want to keep it simple, light. There's a nice pink jacket right over here. Kind of pinkish. I made it a little more lavender. There's that red hat. So I'm going to actually add a little texture to that one. Just like that. There's a lot of jeans and black pants. So I'm going to simplify them by just adding few very thin strokes. And not just with the same blue, but with maybe a lighter blue as well. And I know it's not exactly what's on there, but because you're the artist, you get to pick what goes where. I am going to use a little bit of a dark gray for this jacket here. And I'm going to actually scumble it in. And right about now, you begin to be cautious. Just as I mentioned, how much color is too much before you lose the line work. And I need to add some black. Looking around. And finally, I need something that's actually darker and lesser value, something like this. And you could be doing combinations of maybe just a few touches of color pencil with a few tiny washes of watercolor. That would be interesting. And then one last one right over here. There it is with this pink scarf. So we know it's winter. And there we have it. Just to complement that, that was a little too hot pink. So I'm going to tone it down with this nice brown right next to it. And if you wanted to, it would be interesting if I were to add, as I mentioned, instead of all of it color pencil, just a little bit of watercolor. So I have my watercolors here. Just a little bit of, it looks kind of greenish, but it's all the way in the distance. So I'm going to make sure I mix it really, really light with a little bit of yellow ochre. And I'm just going to add very, very delicate, that's too much color, a very, very light wash, kind of to tie it all together right at that horizon line. Just a touch more color right here at the edge. There we go. So it actually would be a nice playful way to finish it with watercolors, because the way it's set up, it's so light. And I feel it needs one last thing, one more negative space, where I'm just going to follow the line, the contour of what I read here as a cloud. Very soft, fluffy line. Trying to imitate just the lightness of that light that's coming from behind. So there's our session, sketching in Paris. I hope you enjoyed it and put this negative space contour drawing to good use. See you next time.